When I say CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, Samoa Joe, and Cody Rhodes, you might be thinking to yourself, these are just four of the biggest and baddest dudes in the history of professional wrestling. And you'd be right, but there's one other crucial detail that unites those four wrestlers that I just mentioned, and that is the fact that they all spent formative time in Ring of Honor Pro Wrestling. Whether or not you've actually seen Ring of Honor for yourself, odds are you've definitely heard of it. And the reality is, Ring of Honor meant more to professional wrestling than most people are ever going to be aware of. In the 2000s, following the closure of WCW, Ring of Honor was the home of professional wrestling. That is where some of the best professional wrestling stars honed their craft and became the big names that we know today. There would be no Kevin Owens without Ring of Honor. There would be no Sami Zayn without Ring of Honor. There would be no Briscoes without Ring of Honor. Ring of Honor was everything to professional wrestling in the mid to late 2000s. And now it stands as a shell of its former self. But why is that? Is it because of billionaire greed? Is it because of mismanagement of talent? Is it because the brand is just dead on arrival and not big enough to stand on its own? Or is it because Ring of Honor, like many things in professional wrestling, was a product of its time, and its time, unfortunately, has come to an end? I'm going to talk about all that and much more right here in this video. I'm Big Ohm for Real Take Wrestling. Be sure to smash that thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Let's dive right in. As I said before, when WCW and ECW closed their doors in 2001, it left with it a void in professional wrestling. Whatever you think about WCW and the final years of that company or the mismanagement that led to the downfall of ECW, the fact remains that one thing that both those companies provided talent with was a platform to show off their skills, to show off the fact that they could hang in the big leagues and to show off that they were TV ready. But unfortunately, when both those companies closed their doors, WWF and WWE were the only games in town. And at that point, TNA Wrestling had not started up yet, so there really wasn't a place for talent to go. You had the indie scene, but there wasn't that one central place where WWF recruiters could look to find the next big star. Whereas in years past, they would just watch Nitro or watch ECW on TNN. That was no longer an option. Instead, in 2002, Ring of Honor, then an indie company based out of Philadelphia, opened its doors. And it was founded by Gabe Sapolsky, a protege of ECW innovator Paul Heyman. And Sapolsky had a very similar vision for Ring of Honor as was with ECW. Many people today remember ECW as the company that innovated pro wrestling through extreme and hardcore matches and fire burning tables and all that kind of stuff. But it was much more than that. ECW was the underground of professional wrestling. That is where you saw stars that at the time when WCW and WWF were as big as they were not able to get to that level yet. ECW is where you saw stars like Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, Chris Benoit before they got to the big time. And that is where they were exposed to an American audience for the first time, and where you saw some of the coolest names before they became famous. Rob Van Dam is another name that comes to mind. So Sapolsky's vision for Ring of Honor was essentially to try to recreate that magic. And despite some troubles early on in the founding of Ring of Honor, they were able to stay afloat long enough to get some of the best pro wrestling talent all around the world. They were able to attract top stars from Japan like Kenta Kobashi. They were able to attract and get some of the hottest names on the indies, such as Samoa Joe from California or CM Punk from IWA Mid-South. And their home became Ring of Honor. And the first few years from 2002 all the way up to 2005 is probably the golden era of Ring of Honor. That is where you saw the most awesome and insane pro wrestling from some of the biggest names of today. And it is where you saw the identity of ROH as a brand form. The identity was clear. If you wanted to watch professional wrestling, Ring of Honor was the show for you. And mind you, this was not a show that was available to the broader public on television. Ring of Honor did not get a TV deal until well into the 2000s. And at that point, the only way you could really watch it was to buy their DVDs. And let me tell you something. I know a lot of you don't know what a DVD is, but those joints were hitting in the 2000s when it came to professional wrestling. And my point here is, though, Ring of Honor had a clear identity, and it was the brand where the next big stars were going to come. And despite the fact that they were able to cultivate a lot of these stars, the CM Punks, the Samoa Joes of the world, those guys left. Samoa Joe went to TNA, CM Punk went to WWE, so who was going to be that next class to step up? Well, you had the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson, step up, and everyone knows who he is now, and he was the biggest star in Ring of Honor, and that is where he cultivated the name that he has now as one of, if not the greatest professional wrestler of all time. You also saw stars like Tyler Black, now known as Seth freaking Rollins, Kevin Steen, now known as Kevin Owens, El Generico, now known as Sami Zayn, all come up during this time. And this was a cycle over the next decade or so. Ring of Honor would showcase some of the best talent, some of the rising stars of the indies, and then very shortly after, they would go to either TNA or WWE. And despite this, they were always able to have new stars, because the reality was there were only two main wrestling companies that were able to offer significant money at that time. It was WWE and TNA. And despite what we want to say about TNA and how big it was at its height, it still was not offering the level of money that WWE was. And to that end, ROH was still able to compete with them for some contracts. So it wasn't necessarily that their entire talent base was going to go to both these companies. But that all changed in 2019, because in 2019, it was announced that AEW would form. And AEW, in many ways, was taking many of the things that made Ring of Honor special and refining it. It had the identity of the home of professional wrestling. It was supposed to be the alternative to WWE. It was supposed to be where professional wrestlers could be themselves. Many of the same things that we saw throughout the arc and the rise of Ring of Honor, you could say about AEW, just on a more massive scale, with more funding, with more power, and with Ring of Honor stars. In 2019, you had Cody Rhodes, the Young Bucks, and Kenny Omega, four of the biggest stars in both New Japan and Ring of Honor, four mainstays in both those brands, leave and start AEW with Tony Khan. This is where the downfall really began. However, they weren't the only ones. You also had several other big names who were Ring of Honor mainstays leave that company and join AEW. And to that end, other talent who otherwise would have gotten a look by Ring of Honor, who may have signed Ring of Honor contracts over the next couple of years, ended up either signing with WWE or AEW. Because remember, while TNA was big, as I said before, they were not able to offer the same level of money as a WWE was. But now you had another company in the mix. And AEW, given they had a similar strategy, a similar vision to Ring of Honor, had a very specific type of talent that they were looking at. And that type of talent was talent that Ring of Honor would have signed, but they wanted to platform them earlier. They wanted to platform them as bigger than they would have been in Ring of Honor, and that made AEW a more tangible place to be. So the number one culprit, I would say, in all of this was AEW's rise. And this is not a knock on AEW. It is simply a matter of time. So while Ring of Honor had their talent roster decimated because of AEW and their rise, they were still able to sign some top talent here or there. It just wasn't at the same rate. Things really began to nosedive during the pandemic. As we know, the COVID-19 pandemic caused bleak time for professional wrestling. Several indies which ran weekly shows had to shut down or at least postpone shows for well over a year. You had companies like New Japan and Ring of Honor now struggling to stay afloat. And unfortunately, Ring of Honor became a casualty in 2021 to the pandemic. In 2021, Ring of Honor closed its doors, and it was announced that the company was no longer going to be in business. So Ring of Honor's future was really up in the air. What was going to happen? Was it going to be bought by one of the big two companies, or was it just going to go away and be a bastion of history? And to be honest with you, it probably would have been better had Ring of Honor just kind of stayed dead. Because what happened next was profoundly sad for multiple reasons. In early 2022, rumblings began that Tony Khan, the founder and CEO of All Elite Wrestling, had secured a deal to buy Ring of Honor. And right before the 2022 AEW Revolution pay-per-view, he made that announcement live in front of fans on Dynamite in Jacksonville, Florida. It was set. Ring of Honor was now under the AEW umbrella. This idea was met with cheers by many people initially because Tony Khan was perceived as someone who loved professional wrestling. He was perceived as someone who was exactly the type of person you want in charge of the Ring of Honor library, but also the brand and the name. And when you compare the fact that it was either Tony or Vince that was going to buy the company, I think we'd all agree that Tony would be a better guide for that, at least in theory. And it was later announced that Ring of Honor would be coming back, and they even had their first big show, WrestleMania weekend, and Samoa Joe appeared, and it felt great. Ring of Honor felt like it was finally going to get back to where it was, and it was going to get back with leadership that understood exactly what to do with it. But unfortunately, over time, that's not what happened. And I want to be clear about this because there is a distinction to be made. Ring of Honor as a business versus Ring of Honor as a brand. Ring of Honor as a business under the AEW umbrella has been thriving. The fact of the matter is they have had some of their highest buy rates. They've had some of their highest attended shows under the AEW umbrella. And you cannot take away from that, nor can I factually argue with what that is. AEW has been good to make money from Ring of Honor, but as far as I am concerned, in 2025, the ROH brand is more meaningless than it has ever been. And that is because the very thing that brought it to the table, the very thing that made it what it was, the home of professional wrestling in the mid-2000s, is missing. The identity of ROH is nothing. It is a void, a chasm of emptiness and nothingness that cannot be described. And before you think that I am being overdramatic, watch Ring of Honor TV any week. Look at how empty the crowd is. Look at the fact that they film the show in the same arenas as they do Collision and Dynamite. Look at the fact that no one who's at that show is there for Ring of Honor. Look at the fact that none of the storylines, aside from Athena's, make any sense. Look at the fact that Tony Khan tweets out the cards of pay-per-views just shortly before they go on the air. Look at the fact that right now, you, in the comments, cannot tell me what the hell Ring of Honor means. I don't think that Tony Khan or AEW expected to have Ring of Honor just be content for them to put out there, but that is what it became. And in that way, it's a bit of a betrayal from what many fans felt. And this is not saying that Tony doesn't care about ROH or doesn't genuinely put his best effort into it, but my man, I watched the show and it's not good. I watched the pay-per-views and the matches are amazing, but they are missing the one thing that is supposed to make me care, and that is a build. And I honestly think ROH would have been better off being bought by either a large indie promoter or just Sinclair trying to funnel money into making it last longer, because at least then it could have stood on its own feet. Now it is just another place for AEW to hide talent, to try to bring up talent. And I'm not saying that their developmental hasn't worked to an extent, but the point here is, if you're going to have Ring of Honor as a developmental, then make it a genuine developmental. Have it housed in one place. Make the fans of Ring of Honor fans of Ring of Honor. Delegate the product to someone and have it be booked by someone who cares about it and is only focused on that. Tony Khan has a lot to do on a weekly basis. He has 2 major television shows to write every single week, and he's doing stuff for the Jacksonville Jaguars. It is unsustainable to ask him to write another 2 hours of TV a week plus whatever pay-per-views they're doing. AEW, I think, has been a well-intentioned but bad executor of the ROH brand, because it is just nothing. I want Ring of Honor to have an identity. I want Ring of Honor to be what it used to be. But then the more I think about it, the more I realize that I think Ring of Honor's time has just passed. I don't think what made Ring of Honor special when I was watching Ladder Wars with Kevin Steen and El Generico, when I was watching the American Dragon Bryan Danielson take on some of the best talent in Japan, when I was watching CM Punk versus Raven, I don't think that that is ever attainable again, because you have the top 2 companies signing talent, ID talent, all this kind of stuff every single day. There is no more talent for ROH to sign, and even if they weren't with AEW, I don't think that would be the case. I truly believe that Ring of Honor is a concept that was great for its time, but now that time is over. I don't think that Ring of Honor has a place in 2025 in pro wrestling. I think the only way to salvage it at this point is by turning it into the developmental for the spiritual successor of Ring of Honor, which is AEW. AEW, as I said before, is essentially taking some of the best things about Ring of Honor in the 2000s and amplifying it. And in that way, I think that is a good legacy for it. But if they want to be serious about even attempting to sustain the brand, they need to give it its own identity to some extent. Whether that means just having it be an indie show with 400 people in the building or 200 people in the building, at least make those 200 people that are there for Ring of Honor and not there to watch Dynamite or Collision. And while I'm sad that Ring of Honor is no longer what it used to be, I'm happy that I got to experience it. ROH is responsible for some of the most fun I had discovering pro wrestling as a young wrestling fan. And even though I'm not really in agreement with what has happened to it over the last few years, I can look back and watch some of my favorite wrestlers, some of my favorite moments, some of my favorite matches, all in one place at ROH, and look back and smile, because I was there for the rise of something special. And even though it didn't last, I had a ball and a blast watching it. And I'm sure many of you did too. I want to hear from you guys, though. What do you guys think? What's your favorite Ring of Honor memory? Put it down below. Also, if you want to get exclusive access to future video essays just like this one, be sure to hit that join button and become a channel member for as little as $5 a month. You not only support the channel, but you get some cool perks, you get some cool emojis, and you get access to some future video essays and exclusive content that will never be made available for anyone ever again. So get access today. Hit that join button. Until then, I'm Big Ohm from Real Take Wrestling. Be happy, be healthy, and as always, keep it real.